Hello, young people. I'm fully caffeinated in my best attempt to replicate class conditions. I'm going to do my best to keep this as a short yap session. I'll sort of walk you through the conclusion of No Exit here with a few notes and some thoughts on parts of the play. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to look at is kind of in the middle of page 23. Garcon and Inez are having a conversation here. Inez is trying to talk about different traps that exist. And Garcon's saying that, like, you don't have to catch anything in traps. Uh, Inez responds by saying the trap she's setting is predominantly for Estelle, and she will trap Estelle as well. And Garcon says, like, you don't have to. You're not going to catch anything. In the middle of the page, Garcon basically says, like, look, I can feel sorry for you too. He says, look at me. We're naked, naked right through, and I can see into your heart. That's one link between us. Do you think I'd want to hurt you? I don't regret anything. I'm dried up too. But for you, I can still feel pity. This is sort of another attempt of Gersan's to show empathy for other characters in the story. And we know that he's just told Inez that the only way out of their sort of torturous situation is to be empathetic to each other, to care for each other, to show love for each other, and think about other people. This is counteracted by characters' sort of selfishness in response to that, however. So Inez then, in response to this attempt at empathy, shakes away from him and says, don't, I hate being pawed about, and keep your pity for yourself. Don't forget, Garcon, that there are traps for you too in this room, all nicely set for you. You do better to watch your own interests. She pauses then and says, but if you will leave us in peace, this child and me, I'll see I don't do you any harm. Essentially what she's saying here, there's three sort of interesting parts of this. One is she responds to empathy with selfishness, which again is kind of why the torturousness of the situation persists, why it doesn't stop. And Inez here again, given the opportunity to, she says she's setting her own traps. She kind of falls into the trap that has been set for her, which is that if you continue to be selfish, you will then also continue to be tortured. She also, though, does say, Garcon, there are traps for you too in this room, sort of being one to accept the situation. She's missing out on the fact that she's falling into a trap, but she is also accepting the fact that there is no way to escape all of the traps in the room. Garcon's trying to escape some of the traps through the empathetic approach, but ultimately it can't succeed because they're in hell. There is no way of escaping it. She finishes it up with a sort of a truce of sorts where she says, like, look, but if you leave me in a cell alone, I won't do any harm to you. It is the closest um, that Inez gets to kind of trying to work her way out of a situation. Garcon appeals to Inez's sense of empathy. She isn't capable of empathy, though, ultimately. And her decision, it really ultimately impacts all three of the characters. Um, in this, Garcon's going to act in bad faith. He's not going to, I'm sorry, Garcon's not going to pursue Estelle. Therefore, Estelle is going to be unable to have Garcon, and this is going to make Inez unable to have Estelle. All three characters miss out on something that they want. The torturous cycle sort of continues. We move on to Estelle and Garcon and their relationship. We look at this attempt for Garcon to avoid Estelle's temptations, more or less. On 23, Garcon sort of like, what do you want from me? What do you want of me? And Estelle says, you can help me anyhow. He's sort of coming on to him there and trying to make an appeal to him. And he says, if you want help, apply to her, meaning Inez. So Garcon tries to reject her the first time. 2 pages later, on page 25, Estelle tries again, and she says, so gather me up, dear, fold me to your heart, and you'll see how nice I can be. Again, she's trying to appeal to him. And he struggles a little bit more than before and does ultimately free himself from her and says, I tell you, it's to that lady that you should speak. Again, referring to Inez. And Estelle says to her, but she doesn't count. She's a woman. Um, Here, Garcon knows that being overly friendly with Estelle will only cause more trouble from Inez. So he does try to kind of disconnect himself in whatever way possible. But no matter what happens, somebody is going to remain unhappy. If Garcon rejects Estelle will be unhappy. If he accepts Estelle's advances, Inez is going to be unhappy. So there's no way he can go through this without somebody ending up upset, somebody being bothered, somebody reacting to that. On 26, Estelle goes to Garcon once more, and he says, "Don't listen to her, Inez. She has no eyes, no ears. She is nothing." Uh, Garcon says, "I'll give you what I can. It doesn't amount to much. I shan't love you. I know you too well." Finally, he is kind of giving into her approaches here. But he also says, kind of like, this is not going to be much of anything, right? He says it's pointless to resist. He recognizes, Garcon, that it is pointless to resist her. Eventually, she's just going to keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And eventually, he's going to face Inez's anger regardless. He's either going to face Inez's anger because uh, he will get with Estelle, and that will make her angry, or he's going to face Inez's anger because he will reject Estelle, and that will make Estelle angry at Inez for being the sort of catalyst for that rejection. So that, in combination with the fact that Estelle's just never going to stop asking, he finally gives in on page 26, and he says he basically is like, okay, fine, whatever, we can get together. Garcon and Estelle then begin to get together, but there's a break because Inez is watching and it makes people uncomfortable. And Garcon is dealing with his ultimate internal conflict, which is that he views himself and he's struggling with this idea of whether or not he is brave or whether he is a coward. And so he appeals to Estelle and it says, like, look, I will get with you. I don't care what she says. I will get with you as long as you trust me. And he says, I'm 27. He says, will you trust me? He asks Estelle, will you trust me? And she says, oh, what a quaint thing to ask, blah, 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 blah. Consider you're under my eyes all the time. I have nothing to fear, of course. And he says, again, Estelle, you must give me your trust. So essentially here, Carson is acting in bad faith in the sense that his action is determined by another character, right? He needs Estelle's trust, or at least her statement that she can trust him, in order to go forward with his actions. His actions are dependent on what she says. He says it again on 28. He asks her, well, Estelle, am I a coward? Now, ultimately, she can't ever answer this for him because she doesn't know his true actions and she doesn't know the way he acted on Earth. She can't validate anything for this. What he's asking Estelle to do is to help him in his efforts to deceive himself. Garcon is a coward. We find out in this section that he acted cowardly. He tried to escape the war when the war came to him. He's a coward, but he's trying to avoid this and deceive himself into convincing himself that he's not a coward. He knows he acted cowardly, but in his mind, he wants her to tell him that he acted morally, that he did the right thing. He's acting in bad faith here, right? He is considering the meaning of his life based on what Estelle says about it. But Estelle can't control his life. He has to come up with his meaning on his own. Only Garcon can really believe in the reason he gave for avoiding the war and live authentically. He isn't really capable of it ultimately. What he's capable of is living in bad faith. And what that means is he needs Estelle to tell him that he's not a coward so that he can believe he's not a coward. Unfortunately, on page 31, Estelle says the one thing that she couldn't really say, which is, anyhow, I'd love you just the same, even if you were a coward. Isn't that enough? Now, this is a seemingly like innocuous and like innocent statement, but in reality, it's like a really painful thing for Garcon to hear. When she says this, she says, like, I will love you if you're a coward or if you're not a coward. It doesn't really matter. Isn't that enough? It's not enough for Garcon. This basically means Garcon is going to discount her perspective. What she says is not going to mean anything to him. He can't really rely on her perspective as objective or accurate or meaningful. She's going to say whatever he wants her to say, or whatever she thinks he wants to say. But in reality, what he wants is the truth. She can't provide the truth, nor does she know. She just says, I'll tell you whatever you want to hear. What he wants to hear is the truth, and she can't do that. It's impossible for her to say whether he's a coward or not. She didn't live with him. She doesn't know his true actions, his intents, his meaning. Only he can determine that meaning. So she can't be used to deceive himself. What this puts us in is another cycle of torture. Uh, Garcon is sort of torturing Estelle by saying, like, you can't be with me because I can never trust you. Estelle is torturing Inez because Estelle keeps rejecting Inez, is not interested in her, and Inez will continue to um, sort of torture Garcon as well. We see this more than ever the way that Inez tortures Garcon. When Garcon tries to leave, and Garcon says, "Open the doors, open, blast you, I'll endure anything." He talks about all these different ways that he could be tortured, all these physical tortures that he would deal with. Anything would be better than this agony of the mind, this creeping pain that gnaws and fumbles and caresses one and never hurts quite enough. And he tries to open the door won't open. He tries to open the door, and then the door opens. And he says, "I'm not going to go." And he says, "Can't go. There's no point in me going." At this moment, there's like a big kind of key tension, point of tension in the story, because if Garcon goes, then Estelle is left without him. Estelle doesn't want to be left alone with Inez. She has no interest in him. If Garcon goes, he's also going to be tortured because he says, "It's you," talking to Inez, "whom I have to convince. You are my kind. You suppose I meant to go? No, I could not leave you here gloating over my defeat with all of those things about me running in your head." Garcon could have left, but he will never be able to stop thinking about whether or not he's a coward if he leaves. His peace depends on other people and what other people think about him. And even if he leaves, he's going to spend his time thinking about the fact that Inez and possibly Estelle are going to think of him as a coward. He can't find that confirmation through physical pain. And to him, through his statement, the physical pains don't even really compare to the emotional and mental pain that he will face by knowing that he is viewed as a coward by other people. Ultimately, Inez is the one that holds the key to Garcon's peace. And he says, each man on 33 uh, has an aim in life, a leading motive. What he's talking about here is sort of like each person has life's meaning, but this is an essentialist statement, right? Each man has an aim in life, a leading motive. That's so, isn't it? Basically, what he's saying here is each person has a purpose to fulfill. If you remember essentialism, we all have a purpose in life. It's our job in life to fill that purpose. So he's saying each man has an aim in life. Well, I don't give a damn for wealth or love. I am to being a real man. He felt his purpose was to be a real man. Can one possibly be a coward when one deliberately courted danger at every turn? And can one judge a life by a single action? An interesting question that he asks is, can your life be determined by a single action? It's a relevant question to our lives right now. Think about people who go viral for individual moments in their lives, good, bad, or otherwise. Can that single moment judge their life? Inez says, why not? For 30 years, you dreamt you were a hero, and you condoned 1,000 petty lapses because a hero, of course, can do no wrong. An easy method, obviously. Then a day came when you were up against it, the red light of real danger, and you took the train of Mexico. Essentially, he's saying you thought that you were a hero for your whole life, and you acted terribly throughout that life at different points. You treated your wife terribly, treated other people poorly because you thought you were a hero, and you couldn't do any wrong in the grand scheme of things. But the moment came up where you had to be a hero, and you couldn't. You escaped. You took the train to Mexico. Garcon says, I dreamt, you say. It was no dream. When I chose the hardest path, I made my choice deliberately. A man is what he wills himself to be. And Inez says, prove it. Prove it was no dream. It's what one does and nothing else that shows the stuff one's made of. Essentially, here, Inez is countering Garcon's earlier essentialist belief with an existentialist belief. People define themselves through their actions. It's easy to delude yourself in as beliefs into thinking you're a hero and then acting poorly because of it. But when it comes time to act, those actions are the things that define you and define the meaning of your life. Kind of like the idea of actions speak louder than words. If Garcon says over and over again that he was supposed to live a certain life, he just keeps saying it and saying it and saying it. It doesn't mean it's actually true. What's true is the thing he does. And he kept saying he was a hero, but when he had to act heroically, he took the train to Mexico and deserted. This makes him a coward. And by definition, he is a coward. This leads to Garcon realizing that he has to spend the rest of his life convincing, or the rest of his life, he has no life, the rest of eternity convincing Inez that he was not a coward. And that's his plot in life. That is his torture. And he says at the end, so this is hell. I'd never have believed it. You remember all we were told about the torture chambers, the fire and brimstone, the burning mall, old wives' tale. There's no need for a red hot poker's. Hell is other people. Now, we sort of talked about this a little bit in class, the idea that we all have this romantic, this made up idea of hell being hot and fiery and a furnace and the devil being there with his pitchfork. But this is all sort of just like an idea, it's not real. He's saying that's not real at all. That's an old wives' tale. There is no place for red hot pokers. Hell is other people. Hell is other people is Sartre's most prominent, most famous line. It's often read the wrong way, but this is what he is best known for. Hell is other people. Most of the time, people read this line, hell is other people, the idea being that other people make your life miserable. Now, it's not totally true. Interactions with other people will rattle the insecurities. The reason why hell is other people is because we can't avoid acting with other people in mind. Sartre believes we can't avoid acting in bad faith. Even if we want to act authentically, even if we want to live authentically, there is a part of us that always has to deal with the nagging bit of other people. They aren't necessarily bad. Human interaction is the thing that is torturous, especially if you live in bad faith with existential insecurity, as these characters do. Think about this as the moment where you look at the mirror before you leave the house, right? That is the meaning behind hell is other people. The fact that even if we want to live authentically, even if we try our best to live authentically, we do our best to live authentically, there is that nagging bit of us that is held back by the fact that other people are watching us or judging us or looking at us, and that impacts who we are. That torturous bit is the part that continues to get at us. Therefore, hell is other people. You can't escape other people's thoughts, feelings, their gaze, and therefore we live in bad faith. Finally, at the section at the end, all three characters begin to realize that they are in hell, and this is what hell is, right? They know that they are dead. Each character accepts the fact that they are dead, that the weapons they thought they had were useless, and that once and for all, they are there forever, 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 and ever. Repetition is for emphasis. They're emphasizing the eternity and their need to accept the eternity that they will be stuck together. Not only that, there's an interesting bit here too, that they are all laughing. Their laughter is going on as they come to this conclusion. Now remember, they're accepting here sort of their fate. They're accepting their reality. This is Sartre sort of talking about the idea that they are giving over their lives, they're giving over themselves to the absurd, the fact that their lives are meaningless, and that this is what their existence is going to be created for. Now, that laughter is the one bit of levity in this play where they aren't sort of nagging at each other, where they're not going at each other. There's a bit of relief for these characters when they finally accept their torturous circumstances, right? For Sartre, even though these people have terrible fates, when they accept their reality and the reality that they can't change things, there is a brief bit of respite, a brief bit of relief from that resume. This group is going to continue torturing each other forevermore, for the rest of eternity. However, by accepting the fact that this is their reality, it provides them with a little moment of emotional peace. When humans come to the fact that the absurd exists, that life is meaningless, and that we have to live in it, the acceptance of that meaninglessness gives us a bit of a break, gives us a little bit of a respite, and it lets us laugh a little. I hope this worked. If you have any questions, we can discuss this when you return.